Okay, so what are we up to with this big project? It's called Spammer Front End. And the back end is already written for you, so you don't have to worry about that. But you do have to learn how to use the back end. So yesterday, how does the back end developer communicate to the front end developer how to use their application? Do you remember, Ryan?
Sorry, what was the question?
The back end developer might be completely different than the front end developer. How does the front end developer know how to consume the back end application?
They call an API.
Yeah, we call this the API docs, right? So here, I made API docs for the back end that we can go ahead and use. So here's the backend developer telling you how to use their application that you're going to need to use on the front end. Here's the URL you have to hit. Here's the type of requests you can make. Here's what the response is going to look like. So if we want to try the first one, let's come back to this maybe. Let me show you the actual application. Maybe it'll make more sense. So here's the actual application. It looks pretty simple. Let me write 3 messages just so we have some stuff to play with. And it's on render. It's in cold storage, so it has to warm up. So it might take a minute or less, I guess. Okay, so as you can see, you can come in here, you can write a message, you can post it. This is kind of stuff we've already done, right? The cool thing is these messages can be seen by other users. So one user made the message. Now anyone in the world, actually you guys right now, could see these messages. That's the distinction of what makes this application. It's our first full stack application, right? So day one objective is going to be to get a list of all the messages that already exist. So hi, hola, konnichiwa. And the docs tell you how to request the messages. They tell you what URL to hit and what event your fetch will look like in JavaScript. And they show you the response that you can expect. So this is going to be day one. It's going to be kind of what you did yesterday. Fetching, storing that in state. And if you get all that done today, that would be amazing. From there, the complexity will really explode, but I think I'll hold off on talking about that for a while or for a little bit. And I'm going to pivot. Well, let me finish off talking about this. So users can like other users' messages. They can delete a message. They can edit a message. And then the bonus, which is kind of difficult, they can reply to a message. And then the bonus, you can reply to a reply. But this is pretty difficult. And then anybody can delete a message. So the concept is pretty simple, but it's going to take some code and some thought for sure. Any questions on Spammer?
You said anybody can delete a message?
Yep.
Okay.
And then the next project is going to be all about user authentication and how important that is. And this is a good segue to that because obviously this is an awful system, right? Where anybody can delete anyone else's message or edit anyone's message or even like on Reddit, I can't just go, I wish I could, and just hit spam like a million times, right? On my own post. But I can here. So other questions on spammer? Yeah, the idea itself is pretty simple. So you should already have a faint idea of how you could fetch all these messages, right? Because that's what you did a lot yesterday. But what you shouldn't have any idea is, how can I ask the server to delete something, right? How can I ask the server to like something, to change? Like, this is really an update. We're updating the number of likes that a message has. And then how can I ask a server to create something new? And that's all categories of things we're going to explore today. Okay. So pivoting from that, let's talk about what I want to build today. So is this running right now? No. So here's a blank React front-end application. And then I'll show you what I want to build today. So I call it Spray and Pray board. And what I want is for users to have a name and a number and that number is the number of jobs they've applied for. I'm a big proponent in applying for as many jobs as you can. I don't think there's any downside. Either you get the job or you get rejected and you get the experience of interviewing. And sometimes they'll even tell you what you're lacking. But I know it is terrifying starting the process. But after the first few, it becomes very routine. So I want to encourage you guys to apply. So we're going to make it a little contest, right? So eventually all of your names will be on this website if you want. You don't have to participate if you don't want to, obviously. And then when you click on your name, it just increases the count. So it'll be like a little scoreboard. But why does this have to be a full stack application? Why does this have to be a full stack application? Yeah, Roman.
Because I guess each individual is different. So
each individual is different, but technically I could make a React application just by myself and have like 10 separate counters basically.
I guess because you would want like the user to log in and like say, hey, I did an application.
Yeah, no authentication yet. So no logging in, but one user clicking that they applied for a job, like if Roman applied for a job and then Kim could see that on her device. So everyone can see everyone else's input. The input in this case is just a user clicking that they applied for another job. But to do that, we need a full stack application. But right now, let's cheat and let's not think about the full stack application part. Let's just think about our state in React. So what do you imagine our state is going to look like if eventually we want to like display the names with each of their accounts? What is our state going to look like in this application?
maybe like an array of objects with people's names and scores.
And what else does an object always have?
ID.
Yeah. So let's do that, Daniel. How can I make that state in React? What's a good name? Let's start there.
Users, set users, and then use state an array.
An array, absolutely. And eventually we'll get the real names from the server. But right now, I think it's sometimes a good idea to cheat and make our own little objects so we have something to play with until we do it for real and fetch from the server, right? So here I have ID 1, I have name Victor, I have count 3, ID 2, name Ryan, count 5, ID 3, name Roman, count 1. Okay. That is what my state's eventually going to look like when I fetch it from the server. But for right now, we're hard coding some values that we'll eventually delete. But now I want to display them like this on my page. How can I do that? How can I display these? They don't even have to be styled, just the name and the count, but the simplest way we can get them on the screen.
Map over the users.
Yep. So how would I do that?
Users.map, which takes users. A callback function of user.
Callback function with the parameter of user. Yep. There's some red squigglies though. What did I forget?
Return if you're using the.
I will want to return, and for right now, let's just return a div. But I'm writing JavaScript, so I need my curly braces. Yeah. And now, so I know I've been using the shorthand, but I think definitely for learning, I think maybe don't use the shorthand because now I have the option of console.logging user, which is helpful. Because what is user going to look like, Kim, in the console? What is each user going to look like?
An object.
Yeah, it's what specifically? Which objects is it going to be? The first one.
The ID.
No, it's going to be the whole first object.
Right.
Yeah.
So it'll be Victor, ID, name, and count at one time in the array.
Yes. Why am I not? Oh, there we go. Yep. So the first one, ID 1, name Victor, count 3, object. Yep. So I think this is helpful. The longer syntax to see what you're mapping through can be really helpful. Okay, so I said I wanted a name and a count, right? Except we have this warning. Who can help me out with this warning, getting rid of it? Ketzerin, any ideas? Each child in a list should have a unique key prop.
On the div, put the key.
And what's something unique for each user object?
ID.
Yeah, so user.id. Very nice. Okay, now I said I wanted a name and a count. So maybe I'll put it just in an H3. How can I access the user's name, Monica?
User.name.
Yeah, but we do need the curly braces.
Yeah.
And now how can I access, I'll put it in a div, the user's number of applications, Daniel?
User.count.
Yep. And there we go. And now let's spend 2 seconds to make them each have a border, right? How can I get each of these to have a border?
Give it a class name on the div, possibly, and call it maybe user box.
Sure.
And then in the CSS, you could just add a border width and a height, I think.
Okay, very nice. Yeah, we can give it a width. All right, looks kind of crappy, but fine, right, for our purposes. Okay, what's next? We're kind of chugging along, right? Okay, this was fun for kind of getting our feet wet and warming up, but I want the actual real names from the database. So how can I take a look? Well, here we go. But let's start at the docs, right? So I want to fetch my actual users. How can I do that? How can I fetch my actual users, Hara?
Would you have to put in a request that is telling you fetch
Yeah.
with the template literal?
Even before we go to the code, how can I do it using my browser? Because the browser is able to send GET requests. That's what's happening when you go to google.com. You're sending a GET request to a server.
Can you enter the URL?
Yeah, I can just copy this URL and paste it. But then to get the users, what did they say I have to do?
You have to add the ending.
Yeah, it's called the
URL.
path or the
Sorry,
endpoint.
the path, yeah.
So we have /users here. And then render, of course, will take 5 years. But eventually we'll get our users. I might have to switch if this is annoying. This one I already booted up. So this is what it's going to look like. So what did we get back? What data type? What data type, David? Well, that's kind of a tricky question, but
it's going to be a JSON.
Yeah, I was going to say object, but it's actually JSON, right? With property success and users. Yeah. Okay, so there's another way we can make requests. Do I want to show this now? Yeah, I guess I can. The other way we can make requests outside of the browser, and there's going to be a reason we want to do this, is by using an extension called Thunder Client, which you can download. And then you put in the address here and users and the type of request you're making as a GET. And you can see the response here. I know it seems easier to do in Chrome, but there's going to be a reason we're using Thunder Client. It's going to allow us to do a lot more. So that's something all of you are going to download today. I actually should have told you that in the pre-work. It's super easy though and quick. It's just an extension in VS Code to install Thunder Client. It's probably the only thing. No, I was going to say it's the only thing named Thunder. That's not true. But Thunder Client, yeah. Of course, if you have problems with that installation, that I can help you out in a second on that. Okay, so that's how we make the request using Thunder Client or the browser, but we want to make the request from code, from our React component here. So eventually we can store these users, Abdel, Adam, and Jamie, in our user state. So how can I retrieve this information?
An async function and a fetch request inside.
Fetch, we can do better than request. What are we fetching?
Users.
Yeah. Any ideas in the logic in here? I mean, this is a great start, but what were you thinking?
You set a variable and do a fetch request, fetch parentheses, and then you put the URL you want.
Yeah, so I'm going to copy it right here. So here's the request for the users. That's a great start. Maybe we'll just console.log res, right? What will we see though? Well, first of all, will we see anything is the question in our console. So no, why don't we see anything?
You haven't called the function.
Yeah. So if we call the function here, now we see this promise. What did we learn we have to do to resolve a promise?
Await.
Yep. Okay, but now we have this response, HTTP response. We can't deal with raw HTTP. We need to convert it. So we can convert it like that. And now if I console.log info, now we're looking pretty good. Something we're used to, a JavaScript object with two properties, success and users. So now I'm in a pretty good place. But finally, now I want to set what I got from the server as my user state. How can I do that? What do you think, Jazz? I got this nice response from the server, this array of users.
So you put set users and then open close parentheses and then info.
Info. What data type is info?
Info is an object, JSON.
It's an object, yeah, with two properties, success and users.
Info.users.
There we go, yeah. Because remember, here I'm saying I'm expecting an array, not an object. So info.users. There we go. Except now when I press save, I actually don't want to press it because it's going to crash possibly again. Why will it crash?
You need use effect.
Yeah, it will create an infinite loop. So we need use effect to say, no, we actually just want to run that function once ever. So here I'll put in the fetch users. And there we go. Now we have the actual names from the server. Look, our array initially is empty. And we're fetching real information from a server. It's kind of cool. Questions thus far on that?
Why is it info.users and not just info?
Because info, let's console.log info, right? Because what is info? What is this? What data type is this?
An object.
An object. I really just care about the users.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a property called users that's an array. That's really what I'm after. I don't need to do anything with success true. I don't need to save that or store it.
Right. Okay.
I need to know it because the back end is communicating to me that it worked. But what I'm after is the array of users. That's the meat.
Okay.
You'll notice something else cool here, and we'll get into this way more in the back end phase of the bootcamp, but the ID is not a number anymore. It's this, it's called a UUID. It's like this unique string that's auto-generated. So we never have to deal with like making IDs ourselves. It's something I don't know if it's Prisma or the database, but one of those generates for us. So it's kind of nice. Other questions on this? This is a repeat of yesterday. Nothing new yet. So let's talk about the different... I can actually keep some of this. So here was a GET request, right? What are the other ways, or what are the other categories of requests the front end can make to the back end. So we saw what I'm going to call read, which was a GET request. Does anyone know what other categories of requests can be made?
Post?
Yeah, and that's a create. This might get ugly. Let me do these as, I'll try. So yeah, you said a post request. And what is that? That's creating some new data, right?
Yeah, creating and updating the information in the database.
And what's another type of request we can, oh God.
What?
Yeah, give me 1 second. This is all screwed up. You know what? I'm going to redo this. So we have create, post. We have read as a GET request. Was that Hara that said put? So that's update.
Yes.
We have put. And then our final one is what?
Delete.
Delete, which is delete. And together, the acronym is what class?
CRUD.
Yeah, CRUD. So you'll hear this a bunch. What we're going to be more familiar is our HTTP action verbs: post, get, put, delete. What's the only one type of request we did yesterday?
Get.
Yeah, retrieving info, our GET request. And for that, we just did fetch with some API, right? And it just looked like that. It was pretty simple. We're going to explore, I think we'll do delete first. I think that's the easiest. So we're going to explore delete next, the other big category, or one of the 4 main categories of requests the front end can make to the back end. So what might we want to ask the back end to delete in this application?
A user.
Yeah. How can we ask the server to delete a user? This is pretty interesting. That's our objective. But before we get there, my mini objective is, I want to see an X right here. I want like an X so the user has something to click on to delete. Maybe Abdel doesn't, he got a job. Maybe he doesn't want to be part of this silly spray and pray board anymore. How can we get an X to show up? What do you think? Alex, how can we just get an X to show up?
Do like a paragraph tag with X.
Yeah, that should work. Paragraph. Or maybe a button. Might look a little better. There we go. Eventually, when I click, I want them to be deleted. But for right now, when the button's clicked, I just want a function to fire that says will delete. How can I get a function to fire? Well, I don't need to write this, right? You guys hear me. How can I get a function to fire when I click that X that says will delete in the console? Renata?
I would put an on click on the button.
What's a good name to call this function we will create?
Handle delete.
Very nice. How can I define this function, Renata?
Const.
Okay. I don't know why I don't like arrow functions lately, but that's fine. Handle delete. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And then you just want a console.log. So
I do,
just so just equals with a fancy arrow.
Fat
parentheses,
arrow? Yeah.
fat arrow, yes. And then console.log, whatever you said, delete something.
So I click and I see will delete. Perfect. We're good. Now the hard part. How do we ask the server to delete a user? We didn't write the backend, remember? So what's the one way the backend person tells us how to interact with their application? Gyung. Where do we look?
We still look to the URL API link.
API docs, we're going to call them. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I have no idea how to delete something. So I go back to the docs and I look for delete.
Okay.
Wait, is this? Sorry, this is the wrong. I guess I have to update this. This is not. That's not it. Yeah, sorry about that. So, or maybe I can edit it here. This is spray and pray, right? Yeah. So delete. We'll live edit this. See if that works. How do I edit this? Oh, I can. I'm not logged in. Shoot. Hold on. Let me see if I can log in real quick. No. Okay. All right. So we're working on delete. This is actually going to be users, user ID. Oh, and I have it right here. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I think we're good. It was just that one bug threw me off. Commit this. Okay, so we look at the docs. Hopefully they're right. And we see we need to do users/user ID. So do I have access? Which user am I trying to delete? Do it in this block of code. Do I have access to the user ID? And if not, how can I get it? Opens the class. This is very tricky.
Pass down the value of it into the function. Like give it a
right
an
here?
argument. Yeah, and then maybe user ID and then
user ID or what?
User.id.
Yeah.
And
but
then,
here I have to pass on click a function. This is the invocation of a function, totally different.
Yeah,
so I have to make this an anonymous function.
Yeah. And then in your handle delete, you're just going to put ID.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now we can actually see who we want to delete. So remember, we're not seeing 1, 2, 3 anymore. We're seeing the real generated UUID from the database. Okay, so we got the user's ID. Let's go back to the docs.
Where did you get the user ID from again on your
So in this map callback, we have access to each user one at a time. And here, so in this scope, we have access to user. So I'm passing user.id to handle delete. So it's coming from here.
Why are we using another function there?
I can't hear your mic. One more time.
Why are we using another function like in the onClick?
Why aren't we doing like an anonymous function? Just write it in here.
No. Why are we like using additional function?
I can't hear. I'm sorry.
Why is there an additional function inside the onClick?
Why are we creating a wrapper function?
Oh, because this is going to be a couple lines of code, and it might look ugly to put it here, but there's no real reason. You could. Yeah. It's going to be, when it's a few lines of code, I don't like doing it in line. I just think it looks ugly. Yeah. You could though.
How is it bypass, or how is it knowing the value? Is that, you said it's scope? Because normally you have to pass values into parameters or into functions, but it's kind of like bypassing that wrapper function to still be able to access the user ID.
Well, no, this is just an argument. So this is just the input to a normal function.
No, I meant normally like you don't have access to values because that wrapper function is like a function, but we're not actually passing any values. But that inner function is still kind of like reaching for that variable outside user ID. That's scope, right?
That's just normal scope. You can always, a child can always access parents and globals. Yeah. Except this is probably an example of closure because this eventually will be executed outside of its environment that it initially was in. So this is actually an example of closure, but that's a topic for another day, or a topic I don't think we'll ever hit because it's very complicated and outside the scope of the course. So, how do we delete this guy? It says here that this is what it tells me to do. I use my API and here's my path. And I have to use this method delete. Let me just copy this actually. So what is going on here? This API, we don't have a variable called API, but we could. Wouldn't it be nice if I didn't have to repeat this line each time? So maybe I'll make a new folder just called like API with a new file index.js, and I'll throw in the API here, and then I can just call it and use it anywhere I want. It's a little nicer than having to repeat this code every time, the string. So here, how do I use the API to hit this path? I can just import the API and do /users, and that'll be exactly the same, except I screwed this up like that. Yeah. And now for this one, this is actually good. Users, but user.id, it's not user.id. It's what?
User ID?
Yeah. And then, okay. Fetch, when we're using a GET request, we just put in the string, and by default, the method is GET. But now we're saying we want to use the delete method. So we have to put in this second argument, this object, and specify the method is now delete. So we're right here. And everything's going to be the same as before as far as needing to convert this into or from JSON and from HTTP. And let's take a look at what it looks like when they respond to us, right? So I'm asking to delete Adam. And I get this object back, success true, and user, presumably Adam. So the database is letting me know I went ahead and deleted Adam. What do we see here, though, that we don't like?
Still appears on the page.
Yeah. So our state, nothing changed about our local state, but the database changed. So how do we refetch all the users? How can we refetch? The users changed. How can we get them back? Or how can we refetch them?
Fetch users function at the end of this.
Yeah. And now when we save this, Adam's going to be gone, right? And if I click Jamie, now Jamie will be gone too right away. Because it's fetch. Yeah.
On line 15, where did we get the user ID from?
Oh, this is the callback we were talking about, the handle delete.
Okay.
So we're mapping through users. We're calling each item in the array user, and then we're passing it here.
Okay.
Okay, so that was our first non-get request, right? That was our delete. So what did that look like? We did this. That's what that delete looked like. I'll put that there. Now we can do create or update. Maybe we'll do update next. We're making really good time, by the way. So if there's questions or confusion, like we have, what is today? Or is it Monday or Tuesday? Anyway, we have Tuesday. So we have we have 2 more days of lecture after this. So we're in a good position. So if there are questions, definitely let me know.
So what would happen if instead of fetch users in line 22, we put set users info? Will that just return Adam by itself then?
Well, because info is this object with success and user. So then set users would it'd break because it's expecting to be an array, and now you're making it an object. And it's an object that contains a property of one user. So it just...
I'm sorry. I meant like, what if it was set users info.user in here? Would that return only Adam?
Yeah, it would just your users would be one user and the data type would be an object, and the application would break because an object is not an array. So if you tried to down here ask to map, it would be an error. You can't map through an object. Not using map, at least. Other questions? Okay, so the whole idea with Spray and Pray board was Abdel maybe applied for a job today, so he gets to click on his box and update the count to 11. So how can any ideas there? Any ideas there? Yeah, any brainstorms?
Do others use state?
Do we need another use state? I don't think so, actually.
Okay.
Would you do another function?
Yeah, absolutely.
To handle the update?
What is it called?
Like a handle update.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. I'll go with that. And I want this to fire when? When do I want handle update to fire?
Is it when the number changes?
No, the result is
Oh,
the
sorry,
number changing. The app is they just click on their box, and that's the way to say I applied for another job. So how can I get...
When they click on the box?
Yeah, how can I get a function to fire when they click on the box?
On click on that
I
div.
don't know, on click.
There we go. Yeah. On click, handle, update. And now when they click, it says firing. So that's a good start. But now we said we want to, we want to change. So right now, well, let's console.users. What does our state look like again? Let's remind ourselves. So we have an array of one object and they have a name and a count. So we really want to ask the database, hey, go ahead and update that count, increase it by 1. I have no idea how they want us to ask for that. So what do we have to reference to know how they want us to form that question? Kevin?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Zach? What's the source of truth for them to tell us how to ask for things?
I'm not sure.
Okay, open.
Oh, is it API?
Yeah, the API docs. Because we didn't write the back end. That's the only way they can communicate to us. So we said we want to do an update. So here we find put. That means update, right? And this is how you do it. This is the path. And we have to do this crazy stuff that we haven't seen, this headers and body. Headers and body. So let's copy this code and then talk about it. So first off, again, we need, well, there's actually 2 pieces of information we're going to need. So can anyone tell what they are? To properly do this request, what are the 2 pieces of information we're going to need available to us in this callback function?
The ID and the
ID.
The ID and the count. So we're really going to need like the user object because that contains both those things. So how do I pass handle update the whole user object?
I want to say, is it the info that contains both?
Is it what? It's going to be very similar to line 41.
Create an anonymous function.
Yeah. So convert this to an anonymous function so that we can pass in what?
User.
User.
Very nice. So now I'll comment this out for right now, but now if we console.log user, we have access to user. And there we go. So now we have the count and the ID, which are 2 things we need. So let's work line by line to modify this. Do we have the API? Is that available to us? Yep. You guys are shaking your head. Do we have the user.id? Is that all ready to go? Ooh, I have another bug. I'm sorry, guys, in my docs. So let's fix that. This method should be not post, but what? Put, correct. And I closed out my other one, so I'm not going to change it now, but you guys are on top of it. So this is put. And then count. How do we access the old count? How do we access the old count?
User.count.
User.count. And do we want the old count or what? How do we want to modify that?
+1.
Yeah. And then same thing applies. We're going to save this we're going to need to await it. We're going to need to convert it, and then we can take a look at the response finally. We didn't talk about headers. Does anyone have an idea about what headers are?
Sure. Does it give information to like what the data type, I guess, the content type it's going to be?
Yeah.
You know, so that it can process as the JSON.
Yep.
Because like you can get like text or JSON or whatever, right?
Well, it's all text, but the type of text, yeah. So we can send HTTP, we can send XML, we can send JSON. We could probably send an infinite number of things. We're telling it that our body specifically is going to be JSON. So expect JSON. And then here in the body, we're converting our object to JSON. Because remember, the agreed upon language of the web is HTTP, and for our cases, JSON. So that's the language we have to communicate in, because we might be talking to a server written in Ruby or whatever. Okay, let's look at if we did this right or not. Why is this still... I have a console.log somewhere that I don't want. Oh, right here. All right, so when I click, we're sending this request to the server to do a put request to update. And it didn't change the number here, but that doesn't necessarily mean it didn't work, right? So we see success true, and we see a user with count 11. So Abdel now has 11, but why don't we see 11 on the screen? And I clicked again by accident. So we sent a
set your user.
What?
Set user.
So we could set an individual user. That's not a wrong answer. It's just harder than I think.
The fetch.
Yeah, we just want to refetch all the users. We already have that ready to go. It's nice and easy. So now when I save this, we click and it updates for us. So we're on a roll, right? We now did update. So we can add this ugly thing to our Excalidraw.
Do we think of like the headers, like, I mean, just like conceptual, like, do you know how in HTML we have like the header and we have like the metadata? It's like all that extra stuff is like metadata about like our document. Is that kind of like the same thing? Concept of like, this is like metadata, like information of what this type is going to be.
Yeah, except it's doing a little more work because sometimes you don't have a body a lot of the times on requests. So a GET request never has a body. So yeah, so it's doing a little more work than just describing the data. Sometimes it's all you need, kind of. But that's not a bad way to think about it.
Hey, Max, I got a question on line 18.
18, yeah.
So where you have user.count.
Yeah.
That count there, whenever you use a variable like that, are you supposed to use like previous state and then add it to one?
So this isn't actually previous state. It is and it isn't, because this is coming from the input when we invoked this function. So it's actually coming from this. So it's not actually, it's no longer state. It's actually making a copy of it. So we even could mutate it and stuff. So yeah.
Right, but if you said that everybody can click on each other's names and increase the count, then you are requesting the server to increase what you had, your old copy, by 1, right?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Like if like 100 people are clicking all at once.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know in that case. I don't know how the database, I mean, databases, that's one of their main concerns, like that grid, that lock, that's how they're built fundamentally. Like to avoid situations like that. But that's a whole, college course amount of information. Yeah. I just trust that the database and the tools we're using can account for that situation, because that's one of their main concerns. But I certainly don't have like a depth of knowledge in that particular field or how they're doing that behind the scenes. But for our purposes, this is how you would do this.
Okay.
From the front end. Yeah. But what David's talking about is like ACID is like a database creation concept. Like atomicity. I don't know. Does anyone know about databases? Like any database specialist? There's like it's a whole, field of research and whatever. But interesting concept. Yeah.
But what David was saying, I think it's not really, we shouldn't really worry about that anyways. Like usually you only do previous count, like you were saying, when we're kind of like affecting state and changing it, because React kind of references like that current, like the old state, and then it's always like thinking about the re-rendered state. But the value should just be there, like, because we're not actually changing state like you're saying, we're just kind of like getting it from the database. And even if we had like previous state, I don't think it would like get the exact value, because we would have to somehow refetch it from the database to get the exact value, because we're on the client side, right?
So I think what would happen if 100 people near the same time all clicked on Abdel to increase, the database would receive those 100 and it would just process them one at a time. So you would see 114, right? Even though the client was expecting to see 15, it would still process them just one at a time, is my guess.
Okay.
Yeah. Which maybe in an application that's not good enough. Maybe when a user clicks, you want it to like time out and like disable for all users for like 10 seconds. I don't know. There might be a situation where that's necessary. Certainly not in this application. It's going to be necessary, right? All right. So that might be a good stopping place.
I do have one quick question that might be just dumb, but on line 18, where are we getting that count before the colon, like this the two dots, like?
Oh, this is just a key name. This is a variable name. We call this whatever we want.
So we're looking. So is that key? Does that key have to match the key that we're getting back from?
No, it has to match this. They told us what to expect, and we have to provide it to them. So they're the ones who dictate what they want to receive. We're asking them for the favor. We're saying, please make these changes. They're saying, I'll do that if you you give me the exact information how I want it.
So let's say we wanted to somehow change update the name of the person.
If it's not in the docs, so you can't.
Okay, so so they're giving us what we can, like they're giving us the limit of what we can kind of do with their API.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Ultimately, we have no control over the back end. We just can ask them to do changes how they've told us they are willing to do the changes.
Okay, that makes sense. So we're just following their doc.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, in this case, it's different because in this course, you're going to be in charge of both sides. So it's going to feel different than this, but this is, I think, a good mental model originally to feel like it's a totally different developer and you have no control over it. Although eventually you'll be doing both sides, which will make you a better developer for both sides because you'll know what you want on the front end, and on the back end, you'll know what you want. So it makes you a better developer, I think.
And I guess one more little thing on line 21, that looks the info looks a little dull.
Yeah, we're not using it.
So we're not using it.
So we could do that.
Okay.
Technically, we should be using it. We kind of should be doing something like this.
Mm-hmm.
Because things can go wrong in these server requests, and you shouldn't Well, I mean, refetching users isn't going to hurt anything, but maybe like that is a little nicer.
Okay, cool.
All right, I'm going to get the breakout rooms going.